Hello, and welcome to the Control Band. I am your host, Amy Stark. I am an industrial hygienist who has been in occupational safety and health for 15 years. And this is this is my co-host, Jobert. He has been in occupational safety and health for, I don't know, let's say 6 months. Jobert's a cat. He hasn't been in the workforce. Okay, so now that we've got that established, let me ask you a question. Have you ever sat through a safety training session and then completely forgotten most of it by the next day? Be honest now. You sit in a room, someone pulls up a PowerPoint, there are like 60 slides, there's lots of ums and ahs, and by slide number 12, you're already falling asleep. You're thankful that you picked up that cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it's just not doing everything that you need. You're thinking about lunch. You're thinking about work. You're thinking about anything except the training that you're going through. And here's the not so surprising part. Research shows that people forget about 70% of what they learn within 24 hours if nothing reinforces it. 70%. That means that if someone sits through a 1 hour training session, most of that information just gone the next day. Now think about how often safety training works in organizations. It's often done once a year, maybe once during onboarding, sometimes when a new rule appears. But if the goal of safety training is to change behavior, we have to ask an important question. Is our training actually working? So today we're going to talk about how to design training that people actually remember, and more importantly, training that actually changes how people work. We'll look at why traditional training often fails, how adults really learn, why scenario-based learning works better than lectures, and why reinforcement might be the most important piece of all. Because safety training isn't there to just check a compliance box. It's there to actually help people work safer. So let's start with the most common type of safety training, the lecture. You've seen this met before. An instructor stands at the front of the screen, a presentation appears on the screen, slide after slide after slide. Each slide is packed with bullet points. There's lots of text, lots of information, and the audience sits quietly, just listening, or at least trying to listen. But here's the problem. That style of training assumes something that isn't really true. It assumes that people learn best by listening. But learning doesn't work that way. When people are passive, when they're just sitting around and receiving information, their brains aren't very engaged. And when the brain isn't engaged, it doesn't retain much. Think about it like this. If someone reads you a list of safety rules, you might remember a few of them. But if you actually practice those rules in a real situation, the memory becomes much stronger. Traditional training often relies on long presentations and dense slides and passive listening, and the result is predictable. There's low retention. People may complete the training and they may even pass a quiz, but that doesn't mean the information sticks. And if the information doesn't stick, behavior doesn't change. So if lectures alone don't work well, what does? To answer that question, we need to look at how adults actually learn. Here's the thing. Adults learn very differently than children. In school, children are used to absorbing information because they're required to. But we're not in school anymore. And adults tend to learn best when training connects directly to their real life and real work. There are 4 key principles that make training effective for adults. The first is relevance. People want to know why something matters. If the training feels abstract or disconnected from the job, people quickly lose interest. But if training clearly shows how it affects their safety or their daily work, attention increases immediately. I mean, think about it. You are most engaged when something is directly relevant to your interests. And you're at work for 8 hours, 10 hours, however many hours a day. And so you have to be some level of interested at work. So when you are engaged in something that is directly affected or that directly affects your daily life, then your attention is going to increase. The second principle is interaction. Learning improves when people actively participate. Instead of just listening, they're discussing, answering questions, solving problems, or sharing experiences. Speaking of interaction, comment below with your experiences on any one of my videos to interact with me. Because that's the thing about vlogs, is this is essentially a lecture. So I'm lecturing you about not doing lectures. And hopefully by engaging, by commenting below, you are strengthening the experience that you have, and the message that I'm trying to bring across sticks better. Because interaction forces the brain to engage. And by engaging, you're strengthening your memory. If you can tie something, some experience that you have to something that I'm talking about, then that strengthens the message, picking up the message that I'm trying to lay down. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you smelling what I'm stepping in? The third principle is practical application. Adults prefer training they can use right away. If someone learns a concept and then immediately applies it, even in a simple exercise, the knowledge becomes much more durable. For instance, if you're trying to teach hand washing, sanitation, decontamination, the best way to practically apply it is with a small exercise such as covering a balloon in shaving cream and asking people to handle the shaving cream covered balloon while they're wearing gloves. And then they have to take off the gloves without getting shaving cream on themselves. That is a simple exercise that teaches decontamination, it teaches sanitation and hygiene, and it strengthens the concept in their heads. So the fourth principle is problem-focused learning. Adults respond well when training helps them solve real problems. Not theoretical problems, real ones. That's why I provide examples so often. And so asking the questions of, how do we safely handle a chemical spill? What should we do if equipment suddenly fails? What's the safest way to handle this task under pressure? When the training revolves around real challenges, people naturally pay attention. Because again, you're engaging them into something that they deal with on a daily level. And finally, there's one more thing that drastically improves learning, and that's hands-on experience. When people physically perform a task, such as using the equipment, practicing the procedures, simulating situations, retention increases dramatically. Some studies suggest people remember up to 75% or more of what they actively practice, compared to much lower retention from lectures alone. If you think back to we forget 70% from lectures alone, that means that we're only retaining 30% versus 75% if you can get hands-on experience. So if we want training to stick, we need to move beyond passive presentations. We need to move on to scenario-based learning. So imagine two different training sessions. In the first session, and you've probably been through this training before, the instructor explains chemical spill procedures using slides. They describe the steps, they review the policies, they talk about response protocols. Everyone just sits there and listens. Now imagine a different approach. The instructor presents a scenario. They say, imagine you walk into a workspace and see a container tipped over. There's liquid on the floor and you recognize the label as the chemical used in this area. Then they ask the group, what would you do first? Engagement. Suddenly something changes. you're asking people to start thinking. You're asking them to discuss the possibilities. People will provide suggestions and bring up what they've learned before, or they know from experience. Now the training becomes a conversation. Instead of passively hearing instructions, participants are actively solving a problem. That's the power of scenario-based learning. It activates critical thinking and it forces people to mentally rehearse decisions. And mental rehearsal helps build memory pathways that make real actions easier later. So when I was a part of my training in the Air Force was that I was what's called the bioenvironmental engineering technician. And I assisted in responding to CBRN events: chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive, environmental. I forget what the E stands for anymore. It's been 15 years. Give me some grace. Anyway, I helped respond to situations. And we would do exercises all the time. A actual real life simulation of an event, because that helped secure in our heads, in our brain meats, what to do in an actual situation. So these scenarios can be simple or they can be complex. Good scenarios will involve hazard recognition, equipment failures, emergency situations, and decision making under pressure. But the key is realism. Part of my job when I was a bioenvironmental engineering technician, or a B, was I designed exercises for folks to participate in. And one of the ones that I did was a improvised meth lab. So I put together a situation in a small room that simulated what somebody who was creating a meth lab might have available to them. And I used chemicals that I knew would be low risk chemicals, but that would respond to, or the equipment would respond to those chemicals. And by doing so, I created training that reflected situations that that my coworkers would actually face, and created engagement. Now the folks that I trained would have kind of a mental simulation that would strengthen the learning, and it would be like a practice run for real life. Because the goal isn't to just transfer information, it's to help people think through problems before they happen. Because when a real emergency occurs, there's not enough time to think. People fall back onto what they've practiced. And scenario-based training helps build that prep. Now, here's something important. Even great training fades over time. Memory naturally declines if knowledge isn't used or reinforced. And that's why one-time training events rarely create lasting behavior change. I mean, think about learning any skill. They say it takes 10,000 hours to perfect a skill. Well, if you've maybe driven a car, or playing a musical instrument, or operating equipment, heavy machinery. None of those skills develop from just one lesson. You don't become a even mediocre piano player just from learning your scales. Learning requires repetition and feedback and practice. And so safety training works the same way. The most effective organizations treat training as a continuous process, not a once-a-year event. And there are several ways to enforce learning over time. One of the most common is toolbox talks. These are short discussions that are just 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of the work shift that help revisit important topics regularly. So say you have your annual safety training and you're going over fall protection, and you're going over machine guarding, and you're going over ABCD. Then 2 months later, just a real quick 5 to 10 minute chat about A. The next month, a quick 5 to 10 minute chat about fall protection. The next month, a quick 5 to 10 minute chat about machine guarding or machine operation. It's a short discussion that highlights hazards, reviews procedures, or even discussing recent incidents. And because they're short and frequent, they help keep safety ideas fresh in people's minds. So, another important thing is visual reminders. This could be clear signage, simple graph process reminders posted near equipment. These are cues that trigger memory at the moment that people need the information most. One really great thing that I saw when I was doing an inspection was for repairing equipment, or not even repairing equipment, just it was changing a die on a press. And they had their signs posted, they had the procedures posted as well, so that if a person had a question about what step to take during a die replacement on a press, they could take a look at the laminated procedures that were attached with a zip tie to the machine and say, oh yeah, I need to remember to lock the equipment out before I manipulate the die. And finally, there's coaching, or often called on-the-job training. Supervisors and experienced workers can reinforce training by observing and offering guidance. And this is not a punishment. This is support. This is a quick reminder or helpful correction or recognition when something goes well. And these small interactions can reinforce learning far more effectively than a single classroom session. Remember, we talked about leadership involvement. And so this is another method of leadership involvement. And when training and practice and reinforcement all work together, then behavior begins to change. And that's the real goal of training. So let's wrap this up. Training is one of the most common tools organizations use to improve safety. But training only works when it actually changes behavior, and behavior doesn't change from information alone. Traditional training often relies on slides and lectures and passive listening. But people remember far more when training is relevant, interactive, practical, and problem-focused. Create scenarios to help people practice decision-making and develop hands-on experiences to help strengthen memory. Reinforce it through toolbox talks, coaching, and refreshers. In other words, effective training connects knowledge with real work, and it's a cyclical process. Training is about behavior, and behavior improves through practice, feedback, and reinforcement. Thanks for watching. This has been the Control Band, and in the next episode, we're going to explore something that influences safety more than almost anything else: risk perception. Risk perception involves why people sometimes ignore obvious dangers and how organizations can design systems that make safer choices easier. If you are finding these helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who cares about building safer workplaces. And as always, Jobert and I want you to stay safe, stay curious, and keep improving the way we work.